He's a freedom fighter. He fights against Dr. Robotnik, is testing on animals.
I mean, it's funny
Sonic
and it's
says
entertaining.
no to that.
What the hell? Welcome, this is Magnus here, and I wanted to try something out. So we're going to do an episode of Gamer Reacts to Non-Gamer. Basically, the idea of this show came about because I saw Retrotech Sega Genesis by MKBHD, who is an excellent creator, and it's a YouTube-sponsored series where he goes out and he reviews like classic retro tech. Now, the reason I chose to do a reaction specifically on him is because when I first saw it, and I've seen this before, but I'm going to do it with you guys, I reacted. I mean, I was like moving everywhere, like, oh my gosh. A little bit of background about me. I've been a gamer since the late 80s and early 90s and have played every generation of consoles since then and played arcade games when arcade games had a renaissance period in the early 90s. This is a pretty special episode for me because I just... Let's see how I react to this episode, and if you're a gamer, react with me. It's not that MKBHD isn't a gamer, but he's a relatively new gamer.
Now, I'm a PS4 user myself. Some of you might not know that, but it's actually my first gaming console ever and my current gaming console of choice. So
he wasn't around back then, kind of young, but here we go.
We were going to my cousin's house, and I was like, what is that?
It was a pretty
and I was like, yo, come to my basement and check this out.
My uncle actually had the Sega Genesis, and he got it before any of us did. And we were excited because it brought the arcade home, and that's what the commercials said, that you would have as good graphics that you get in arcades back at home. And that was almost unheard of. You know, I remember playing the Sega Master System, which is what I had at the time, and it was nowhere near as good as the arcade. Like, I had a game called Shinobi, and the arcade version of Shinobi was so much better than the 8-bit home console version of Shinobi. Though it was still a good game in a home console, it's just graphically there was no comparison. So to get Genesis to come out in 1989 with its revolutionary graphics and beat Nintendo to the 16-bit revolution punch was definitely something that was pretty cool. And I remember going over my uncle's house and finding an excuse just to go over so I can play the Sega Genesis and a little bit of Moonwalker. Yes, I said Moonwalker.
back in the 80s, if you were gaming, Nintendo was it until this console came out.
True.
The Sega Genesis. So I have no experience with the Sega Genesis. I'm starting from scratch. These things are super rare. Sega Genesis in the original box that it came in.
That's pretty
like
cool.
Old tech. No warranty. I think I'm ready to finally play
Oh gosh,
a
don't
Sega
do
Genesis
that.
game for the first time. And I guess what better game to play than Sonic the Hedgehog? There was no click, so I'm not sure if that was
No. Come
correct or
on.
not.
Like Tell me you feel this.
No graphics yet.
Put it
It's
in
starting to scare me, Sonic.
and turn it. What are you doing?
I definitely remember all those retro videos now of people blowing out the cartridge. This is...
Yes, retro videos of people blowing out the cartridge belonged to all videos that were Nintendo related. So if you had an original NES 8-bit and you had to stick it into that box, then yeah, it makes sense where you had to blow out your cartridge because for some reason that was a thing. Although blowing on your cartridges as a warning only further damaged your cartridge. You just had to take it out and put it in again. We didn't know that, so we would blow on it, but honestly, you didn't have to. And as a Sega fan, Sega Master System or Sega Genesis never had to do that. So no, don't blow on the Sega Genesis cartridge. It never had that problem. All right, continue.
It's definitely that cartridge. Was it backwards? No, that was definitely the right way. Connect.
Oh, okay. All right, let me continue.
I think I'm just gonna press the reset button. There's no other buttons on this.
I don't... what is this?
So there's...
Now that was some editing magic right there. No. Cringeworthy. Pop it in, turn it on. Whatever. Let's continue. I'm gonna rewind it for a
and
second.
getting destroyed in sports games.
Especially holding the controller, it feels like
Console Wars. I know another channel, Console Wars, and he does not look like... Oh, right. He wrote a book called Console Wars. Anyway, my mistake.
They come back with the Master System.
A beautiful system. We fell for it. I had that. That's what I grew up with.
Has Super Mario.
The Sega Genesis.
Or the Sega Mega Drive everywhere else in the world.
Rising from the ashes.
It's bigger. It probably has better graphics.
It definitely had
myself,
better
Sega and
graphics.
Nintendo were all we talked about. We chose friends, basically.
A Nintendo person is someone who gets good grades, someone who plays it safe.
The Sega people were edgier.
The Genesis, you don't play in front of your parents. It's like a dirty magazine.
Sega Genesis was not a dirty magazine. I played in front of my parents all the time. The only problem that they had was that I'd be playing video games instead of studying. It was not like a dirty magazine. Back then, at least my parents and parents that I knew in our neighborhood didn't know what or care what video games were. They weren't as sensitive, so they'd see it and they'd be like, whatever. Even more... Don't get me started on Mortal Kombat.
You would be more, because like I never played.
How old are you?
25.
Oh.
He's so young.
Before my time.
That's why you talking to me like that.
Yeah. So it's
All right, so from here, it looks like they're gonna play Mortal Kombat because, that's another thing. That Sega did not happen. That was predominantly on Sonic games, but anything else did not say Sega. So another editing trick for those that don't know, and it just made me cringe. Like, that's not how Mortal Kombat works. I got Mortal Kombat on the Genesis behind me. Anyway, let's continue. So this looks like it's gonna be a real gamer that recognizes Mortal Kombat versus MKBHD, a non-gamer. So we'll see what happens.
My go-to was always Scorpion.
I'm gonna go with Hat Guy.
Scorpion.
Guy, that's Raiden. You called
Good
me God of
choice.
Thunder Hat Guy.
Yeah, Hat Guy.
Oh my
Okay,
gosh.
let's see
Wow,
how good
I
she
remember
is.
all the things that are so cheap.
She
Okay,
remembers.
sorry.
She
I'm
does
gonna
the
say
spear.
so cheap because that's the only way I played when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Which was harpoon and then uppercut. I remember being in a
Okay.
Mortal Kombat tournament. At the
So she
local
was in a
Blockbuster.
tournament.
They hosted it?
They hosted it.
Yeah, I
won
remember
the
that.
tournament. Just doing this over and over. I was just being cheap.
So she went easy on
Some
him.
things out. Let me go with Glasses Guy.
Johnny Cage.
Johnny Cage.
He's an entertainer. He's a stunt guy.
So she keeps doing the spear
I keep
and uppercut. So she at least knows how to play, but she's not doing anything else.
Now you've got Sonya Blade. She's got an
Yeah.
awesome hand. Come on.
She's either going easy on him.
I think Sonya
I think she
Blade-
went really easy on him, but
I just remember with Mortal Kombat, I had a connection to it because
she either went really easy on him or the fact that she doesn't know how to play.
feels like that's what set the Genesis as a console apart, is a lot of people are playing these games in their formative years and working up these feelings for it and figuring out your identity as a person, and it's really
Okay.
deeply set. So
That's
an icon.
going really deep in it, but all right,
So the
fine.
Genesis's gameplay clearly
Blue blur ripping across the screen, running through loop-de-loops. His speed was the personification
You know what?
of the
The
16-bit
graphics
era.
themselves back then, in the first Sonic the Hedgehog, compared to mostly what was out there, was really good.
Hey, I'm Sonic. Do something. I can't just be standing around.
Which of these aren't? This is dope or nope.
Dope or no?
So
Okay.
console this came out in 1994.
What? Excuse me?
I never
Is
even
the
heard
interactor,
of the
virtual
Aura
reality game. Feel
interactor.
the punches, explosions, kicks, uppercuts. I don't know if I want to feel those.
But Sega had no shortage of peripherals that they wanted to release to the
This
audience.
thing slaps. I feel like a Ninja Turtle.
It looks like it's your birthday.
Back then, some
Yeah,
some
so
peripherals,
or maybe that's just the
you know, as young as I
music.
was, like
Spine.
early teens, was smart enough not to buy
It sounds like the entire
some of
game
this
is
crap,
underwater.
and had no desire to. And it was no surprise that these things failed.
I feel like you got to try this.
All the way to 10.
Jesus. Yeah, you weren't kidding.
This is just nothing's even happened.
Light gun tech hasn't really changed much, and now we have VR stuff. So the biggest thing
Light gun tech existed within the 8-bit era, with Nintendo and Sega both having light gun peripherals. That even came with the systems.
Oh, okay. You know what's funny is that even though it's
That
IR
looks
and it's
fun.
so like hokey and old,
From 93.
The
It's called the
activator. We all know the
Full
activator.
body controller.
Or at least
Better than standard hand
gamers do on how it used infrared lights that go up. And each button was a separate section of the activator, so you looked in different directions. If you moved, it would block the infrared light, and then of course it would activate that button. But that idea was
Some assembly probably
kind of like an early look into VR, of what they wanted VR to be like, or interactive. Sega even had a VR peripheral that they never released because it would make people sick for the Genesis.
Let's plug it in.
So Sega was definitely thinking next generation.
Alright, I know my character is Sonia.
No, your character's not Sonia. Your, your character was never Sonia.
Oh, I just picked Sonia. 2-player Mortal Kombat. Okay, that's jump. Wait, I'm just jumping over and over again. Jumping.
What if you just freak out? Just like go crazy.
Jumps. He's jumping pretty
His
fast.
lighting is horrible for the room.
I don't know.
Do you want to give it a
Horrible.
shot? Breaking beams?
Because you can't have those lights interfere with the system, and that's the unfortunate thing about the activator. That's why they're not really moving or doing much, because
I'm not even in the game still.
it's hard. Their room setup with those lights above them is not
There's no
gonna make it
instructions, right?
work.
This is really truly like
There
But
were instructions.
watching them
there
freak
were.
out over it,
When setting
like
up,
trying to
make
figure
sure
it out,
make
is
sure
pretty
the room
funny.
has a constant light source such as natural light or
Oh,
floor
see,
light.
now they're
Do not
figuring
use
it out.
activator in a room with fluorescent lighting.
like overhead lights.
Like that.
Like there
this-
you
the
go.
lights that
See,
are
they
here.
just figured it out.
Oh,
Oops.
not the best idea. This is a no.
Nope.
No kidding.
So clearly not all of
You didn't
Sega's
really know when video games came out, and Sega really standardized the process.
They did with Sonic Tuesday. So a good
They created trailers,
information,
built
Sonic
months and months of
Tuesday.
anticipation,
And then
hype into
since
it.
then,
Nintendo didn't care about creating
games
hype
are
at the
released
time.
traditionally on Tuesday. Sega came out with it, so it's
Sega
pretty
was
cool.
also very explicit in their
Jonathan
attempts
Taylor
to
Thomas.
buy or borrow coolness.
Got Michael Jackson's Moonwalker.
I love Moonwalker.
Genre of video game.
It was
Dance
cool.
video game.
Dance
So
video
music
games.
video comes
You know what's
alive.
funny?
Sega.
DDR.
Figured out
Dance
what
video games.
Nintendo
Who knew where it
got.
would go?
The whole point of
Anyway.
home console
There's probably some stuff we shouldn't have been exposed to at that age. Ripping somebody's heart out, even virtually. It's probably somewhat damaging.
Somewhat damaging. Okay,
In
so
December of 1993,
they're
Senator
talking about the
Joseph Lieberman
ESRB,
launched congressional
the
hearings
ratings
into video
board,
games and
basically,
violence.
and how Genesis contributed with Mortal Kombat and like Night Trap. Well, what thing that I barely see ever mentioned is that Sega, even before the ESRB, already had their own ratings system on their games. So before those letters, Sega had their own little format of rating systems.
That was when Sega finally
But then, of
surpassed
course,
Nintendo.
with that,
Sega
they
successfully
changed it to
positioned
the
themselves as the sophisticated
uniformly
alternative
adopted
to
ESRB. I never hear that mentioned anywhere,
Holding
but
on to that lead proved to be
true.
a bigger challenge.
So even though the Genesis was crushing it, the video game industry is constantly changing and evolving, and everyone has to keep up.
So in
they showed Dead or
1999,
Alive.
Sega wants to step it up a notch. And
See, they just skipped
released
the
Dreamcast.
failure of the
But
Saturn, the failure of the
new challenger
32X, the
in
failure of
video
Sega CD, and just
Sony
jumping
is
straight
now
into
in
Dreamcast.
with the
PlayStation had already been around for
And
4
in
years.
2001, Sega
So,
finally bowed out. and
Sega
stopped
bowed out
making
for a
consoles.
number of reasons, not only due to competition in PlayStation, but also the unfortunate ability to easily play burnt games on the Sega Dreamcast, which made developers want to
Would you
say,
is
no,
the legacy
we're
of
not
Sega
developing for it.
Genesis?
It's the first console that ever threatened Nintendo's kingdom.
Also true.
Without Sega constantly innovating,
I think at least the people that contributed to this video did know what they were talking about.
I don't
But the
think we would've
editors and
gotten to 64-bit
MKBHD probably
graphics
didn't know
consoles
much,
in a
but
reasonable
it's
time.
alright.
Sega made Nintendo better because competition breeds innovation.
Okay.
The Gen-
Sega influenced how we play games because if it was just the Nintendo,
A lot of these
maybe
sound
we wouldn't
effects
have
were
the
not
cool,
from the
aggressive
Genesis.
games that we have now. Assassin's Creeds, the Call of Duties. Those games found their beginning with the Sega Genesis.
How?
The battle.
All right, so this is one of two videos that he had. This is hard to watch. I apologize in advance.
Sega successfully positioned themselves as the sophisticated alternative to Nintendo. But 30 years later, the question of which console is better still persists. So today, we're going to do our own test to determine a winner. This is Console Wars.
This is not Console Wars.
This is Console Wars!
So these are the categories we're testing today.
Oh, God.
Gaming and graphics, sound chip, and the mascot. So Dave, I'll start. Gaming and graphics.
Horrible. No, I'm sorry. Gaming and graphics are two completely different,
Blast processing
completely
is how we're
different
able to get all of these
categories.
moving images and tons of things on the screen
Blast processing
in
was a
quick
marketing
succession
term. It
without
just has a
slowing.
faster
So you see that
processor.
if you like lose all your coins. and
Twice
they're
as
all
fast
on
as the
screen
Super
at the same time,
Nintendo.
like that.
Yeah, like that.
Did you see that slowdown right there? Did you see that slowdown? Look at all
This is
They
insulting.
can't handle all of these sprites on screen.
And look at that 3D ring.
That
3D ring.
3 frames a second.
3 frames is all you need, baby.
It was not
Last time you
about.
see the graphics from
All right,
Super
graphics
Nintendo.
mattered, but
Anybody is standing, please sit. You're about to be blown away.
Donkey Kong
So I
Country.
brought Donkey Kong Country.
This is unfair because I'm gonna have to stop
that we're
this.
seeing.
See, this is completely unfair. They brought two games that are completely different times. Sonic the Hedgehog was released in 1991. Donkey Kong Country was released in 1994. Two totally different times in gaming where developers had actually learned how to use and develop their games a lot more technically pleasing and graphically advanced as in 1991. A more fair comparison would have been Sonic the Hedgehog versus Super Mario Brothers from a graphics comparison. Or, if you're going to use this game, use something like Vector Man, Vector Man 2, Dracula Bloodlines, The Adventures of Batman and Robin. So many Sega Genesis games that push the envelope because it was released in a similar time period as Donkey Kong Country. So this inexperienced comparison is just frustrating as a gamer.
Right here. Yes, I don't need to go 1,000 miles an hour. Look at these rendered 3D characters. Look at that high five. Look at the...
There were 3D pre-rendered characters. Pre-rendered. The system was not rendering those graphics. They were not rendering those 3D graphics natively. This was all pre-rendered and then just slapped onto this system. That was a trick that was learned and was used by Sega Genesis as well. This is not a fair comparison, but that's what you get for being on this type of channel. Oh, I might get heated.
frame rate of that.
What a beautiful fall that was.
Again, unfair. And sound chip should just be Super
So I brought
Nintendo
some evidence
because
on my
it's
iPad. I have some various
more
sounds
technically
associated with
advanced.
each of these two consoles. You can state your case about which one's better than the other.
That's the sound that whenever Sonic picks up a ring, you
Sonic
make that
ring.
sound. Now if you go to like a gas station, you hear them open the register, it's that sound. That little chime
it's not.
gives me such joy.
I'm glad your joy comes from a gas station. Fantastic, just a beautiful
Simple as
sound,
that.
isn't it? So that was when the game Sega Genesis.
This is
compared
a
to the
horrible
robust
comparison.
Flavors you get
This
from
is
Super
just-
Nintendo.
This is literally one sound effect that has nothing to do with the amount of channels
Sound
each of them
chip
have
for the Super
and what
Nintendo
they're
was
able to
designed by Sony.
produce.
The Genesis, I think they just got off
Super
the rack
Nintendo's
parts.
chip was more
Yeah, they
advanced.
just walked into a drugstore and picked up
Technically.
what they could find,
Pretty much.
put it in their console.
But they each
Pretty
have music and sound that is pretty cool on
Alright,
each
so
system.
let's start
So
with
that's
Sonic.
not fair
Take a
either.
step forward.
This is
Sonic's
embarrassing.
Cool.
This is
He's
embarrassing.
fast, he's got this cool spiky hair.
Why did they
Check out
force
that
them to do
spiky hair.
this?
I wish I had hair like that. He's a freedom fighter. He fights against Dr. Robotnik, is testing on animals.
I mean, it's funny
Sonic
and it's
says
entertaining.
No to that.
Sonic
What
just
the
looks
hell?
like your white friend with dreads.
What the hell?
Let's have Mario step up.
Let's look at a real American hero. Mario is a hard worker. He's a plumber. One of the hardest, most respectable jobs. And he works with his brother, so he's a family man.
He's a
What does
drug
this have
addict.
to
He's
do?
always doing mushrooms. He also
That's
takes
not-
prescription
that's not-
pills. Dr. Mario. He's not a doctor. He's saying he's a
Although this is
doctor.
pretty fun. It's embarrassing,
Where
but
they
it's pretty
counteract
funny.
each other.
Oh yeah, mixing.
But it has nothing to do with the
prescriptions.
quality of
That's
the
great.
system. At least how they presented it. So Final
So at the end of
Judgment
the day,
is
there's a
based
lot to
on
like about
BS.
both of these. Clearly some pros and cons to each.
And that's an ugly Super Nintendo because Super
So between
Nintendo
these two,
would
for me-
age and it would cause, the dye that they used caused it to turn yellow like that, unfortunately.
Just because I'm that guy, I would actually probably lean towards me being the Sega Genesis gamer, mainly because I feel like I would want the high definition graphics and of course this matte black. So my winner
High
is
definition graphics was a
Genesis.
marketing term, and matte black, it was cool. I chose the Genesis too. But, I don't know what to say. Anyway, let me know what you guys think about this reaction, if you agree or disagree with me. This is coming from a gamer's perspective. If you're not a hardcore gamer, then I could understand why. It's still entertaining, and I hope you were entertained, which is all I wanted to do. Anyway, like, share, and of course, if you want to see more of these videos, you can make my day if you subscribe today. This is Magnus, and I'm out.